Hello and welcome back to the Everything is Black and White podcast, and welcome to the opposition preview. Spoiler alert, as you can probably tell by the accent, I'm not Andrew Musgrove and I'm not Aaron Stokes either. I am Ned Keating. Imagine me like a supply teacher instead, just coming in. No DVDs being wheeled out though this week. Instead, I am joined by Tom Rennie, West Ham fan Tom Rennie, who is going to give us the lowdown on what to expect from the Hammers. Obviously a big game for both teams. Newcastle especially trying to obviously kind of claw their way back up towards or keep themselves in contention at least, for the Champions League places. West Ham trying to build some momentum between now and the end of the season under Graham Potter. And Tom, Graham Potter's where we're kind of going to start as well, because it feels like a good starting point for West Ham. Obviously, last time Newcastle would have played West Ham, it would have been a different manager in the dugout, different manager at the helm, Julian Lopetegui. That wasn't a long marriage at all, and definitely wasn't a happy marriage either. Graham Potter's come in. What kind of changes have we seen? What kind of, in terms of the approach, in terms of the style of football that we're seeing under West Ham, what's different under Graham Potter compared to Julian Lopetegui?
Well, firstly, can I say it's great to be back. After the last time I was on this show, I got absolutely everything right about Julian Lopetegui and how bad he was and what was awful about him and how bad performances were. The only time I was wrong was doing this podcast before the Newcastle game, where they actually played quite well and won. Beyond that, everything else was borne out, and he was sacked a little bit later than I thought he would be because he was just so bad. But there we are. Look, Lopetegui had to go really briefly because he had no hold on the squad whatsoever. I mean, I've spoken to lots of people now who knew the situation intimately, and he was so chaotic. He'd be training the team for one thing, he'd change his mind on the Saturday, and they played totally differently. And you could see that in the way they performed. He was falling out with players, falling out with his staff. The transfers were a mess last summer. He really pushed for someone called Carlos Soler, who played all right in the game at Newcastle. Many of you might have seen that. That's all he's done. Like, he offered nothing. He can't get into this team who have sat 15th all season. So what does that tell you? And he pushed for Guido Rodriguez, who after about 4 weeks, you were like, wow, he can't run. Why do we bring someone who can't run in a midfield that already can't run? And they let James Ward-Prowse go to bring these two guys in, who, now he's been brought back, is the first name on the team sheet, obviously. So it was a mess. Look, West Ham were never going down because the bottom three are so bad. But to be in that conversation, as I'm sure Newcastle fans would have experienced in, recent years, you're a bit like, why are we here? Like, why are we here with this squad when these players should be, should be higher? They should be doing better. We hadn't beaten anyone by Newcastle like above us in the table all season until like the Arsenal win last weekend. And I think we don't currently know what Graham Potter's team is in terms of what they're going to be. I think he's coming and noticed it's a salvage operation. There's nothing really to be gained from this season. There's nothing really to be lost. He had to win 3 games of what was left, and it would have taken the worst manager in the history of West Ham United, a club who'd employed Avram Grant over the years, for them to have gone down. So, he's come in, and a couple of the performances were terrible. Brentford at home, Crystal Palace at home was a particular nadir of the season, but also the strikers got injured. So, in his first game against Villa, for 10 minutes in the FA Cup, the front three was Somerville, Kudus and Fulkrug with Paqueta behind. And we were like, whoa, this looks good. Fulkrug flicked it on to Paqueta. Paqueta found Kudus. Kudus found Somerville. Somerville found Paqueta. And they went 1-0 up. And within 10 minutes, Fulkrug pulled his hamstring. And then Somerville pulled his hamstring. We've seen neither of them since. So they played for 10 minutes and it was over. We've already got Antonio with the broken leg from his car crash. So, that was a problem. And so that explains the Palace game, explains some of the other games. But what he's done for the wins, and I've been at the 2 of the wins, I didn't go to the Arsenal game, but he basically has just gone, right, well, I want to play 3 at the back, and I've got Kiltman, who's not a defender, but he's a decent footballer. I've got Todibo, who's a good footballer, but not a defender, so same scenario. I've got Mavropanos, who's the most kamikaze individual in football history. He's worth a goal tier if he's playing. But Todibo can only play 60 minutes. And he's got 35-year-old Aaron Cresswell, who's, well past due to be moved on, but has also come in and done pretty well in a role that he's filled in at so many times over the last decade he's been there. So that works. Wan-Bissaka's been great, maybe the only real consistent performer in terms of players who played all season. Bowen's the best player, but he missed 8-9 games in the middle of the season. So Wan-Bissaka's been great. Ollie Scars has come in and been great. So he's built his back line. The midfield is utterly uncreative but serviceable now with Souček, Ward-Prowse and Alvarez. And he's had Kudus and Bowen sort of up front, sort of doing whatever they want, really. Bowen's a great player. Kudus has been diabolical this season. I don't think they're going to be able to sell him for the money they want. So I think he might be there next season, which will be contrary to the plans of everyone at the club, really. So that's what he's done. He's found a team last couple of games. I went to Leicester, and Leicester was so bad. Once the second goal went in, they just shut it down. Learned nothing, have no shots. Let's see what they've got. They had nothing. And the Arsenal game was a great rearguard performance. I suppose the one thing he's really done to round this off is stopped it being so easy to score against West Ham. That's the thing he's done. And that's what you can do, really. It was a disaster before he came in, and now he looks competent again. It's not been a great leap forward, but anything forward is better than what they've been for 28 games.
And in terms of key men as well for West Ham and what to look out for, you mentioned, this time last year, if this game was happening, we probably would have said Mohamed Kudus would have been a star man for West Ham to look at. As you said there, not been his best season. And, whether or not, obviously you were saying there about the fact that West Ham are holding out maybe for a bit more money than perhaps they're going to get in the summer for him, might see him stick around. But then Jarrod Bowen, as you said there, that key man, leading by example as a captain. Yes, he missed those games in the middle of the season, but he's coming back now, coming back to the fore, leading this side, being the captain that you kind of want and love. And I suppose he's probably the danger man, isn't he, for West Ham? That's probably going to cause them most problems, cause Newcastle most problems on Monday night.
Yeah, Jarrod Bowen's the best. He's just so good. And for me, if we're looking at people who play attacking right in the division, I'd go Mo Salah number 1, I'd go Bukayo Saka number 2, and I'd go Jarrod Bowen number 3. I think he's outstanding. He does absolutely everything. And in fact, on his best form, I think he's as good as Bukayo Saka, if not better than Bukayo Saka, because he scores more goals, scores different types of goals, has done it over a long period of time, will fill in any position you want. I love him. I just think he's so good. And he is led by example when he's been available this season. He's not like a shouty captain, but if you watch Jarrod Bowen and you see the sheer amount of effort he puts into every single game, it's sort of that Bobby Moore example. Obviously I would say that, but like everyone's got these examples that they're not shouters, but you watch them play and you think that's exemplary. We should be doing that. That's a lead by example captain. Yeah, and 50 Premier League goals for West Ham, more on top of that with the European goals, the winner in Prague, all of it. I mean, when he retires, whatever happens now, there will be a statue of Jarrod Bowen outside the stadium. That's the level that he's got at. Plus now related to Danny Dyer. Amazing. What more do you want? So he's incredible, and he will be a danger man. And if a chance comes, he will hit the target. If 2 chances come, he will score one of them. Scores headers, scores from distance, scores from close range. Does the kind of Iron Robben, they call him Iron Bowen every now and then, cut inside and put it in the other corner goal. Scores them all. Right foot, left foot. He's just brilliant. Mohamed Kudus should be the best player in the league, in my view, for what talent he has. He's a bit like Wilfried Zaha in a way, like get him the ball and good luck getting it off him. And we saw elements of that against Arsenal a couple of weeks ago. But in terms of delivery this season for someone of that talent, he hasn't scored many goals. He hasn't assisted many goals. He's not had a consistent position. And when everyone was injured, he was fit. And what was he doing? What did he offer? Look at the way Jarrod has carried the team at times. And he just couldn't do it. There is something missing with Mohamed Kudus. I don't know if it's attitude. I don't know if it is ability in front of goal. He missed a sitter against Brentford a couple of weeks ago that just had to go in. And maybe it is the wrong club for him. Like, maybe it is. Maybe he needs to be somewhere, I'll say Man City, but you can put different examples in. They have 70% possession and, he could do a little dance or whatever. Or maybe he needs to be at a Forest where they do 80-20 and he does what Callum Hudson-Odoi is doing. I don't know, frankly. I think the fact West Ham have been a mess this season has not helped him at all. Now, I'm not putting all the blame on him, but I'll say the proof of the pudding is he's not done enough this season. So they want to sell him for 80. They bought him for around 50. I'm not sure they'll get it. But I do think moving forward, if he is there next season, this might be the right manager for him, where Lopetegui certainly wasn't. Because, again, everybody hated Lopetegui. The players, the staff, the fans. Everybody hated Lopetegui. No one was giving anything to Lopetegui. And so maybe Graham Potter might turn it around. The other danger man I'll briefly mention is Wan-Bissaka. Him and Bowen involved in the goal at St. James's Park. But second goal, I think it was. Soucek scored the first. And he's been fantastic. Like, weirdly, defensively a bit suspect, but offensively, brilliant. Skills, assists, the exact opposite of what I thought we were getting. And the fact that, if he was still at Man United, I think he'd be starting every game in place of Diogo Dalot is weird, but he's been great. So they're the 3, but really it's 2.
And of course, West Ham's recent form going into this game has really picked up. Those wins against Arsenal and Leicester as well, kind of giving a confident mood going into this match around the team as they look to kind of move up the table and build this kind of momentum going into next season. Of course, there's probably little to play for between now and the end of the campaign, unfortunately. There's lots of teams in the bottom half like that as well, including potentially Manchester United. But for West Ham, it is probably laying those foundations, isn't it, between now and the end of the season to make sure that next year is a lot more successful than what this one's been. And another win this coming Monday, and the confidence is there going into that game would definitely be a big help for them.
Yeah, that's it. I think that we are a couple of games away now from Graham Potter trying a few more things. The attack is coming back. I even saw some pictures of Fulkrug in training. Look, no chance he's going to be there next season, but might be nice to see him. We've seen him for like 8 minutes this season. It's March, so that might be nice. The Evan Ferguson thing is interesting. I think Graham Potter, by all accounts, really wants to sign him. I'm seeing no evidence that he's worth signing currently for any money. He looks so painfully off it, and he's coming on a short-term loan with no arrangement to buy, and he got put through the other night against Leicester and had no confidence to take a one-on-one with the goalkeeper with his left boot and delayed for too long and got caught. He looks, I wouldn't touch him, frankly, from what I've seen so far, but we'll see. So we're still a couple of games away. I think Graham Potter wants to get 40 points because, every position is a couple of £1 million. He'll think 11th is possible. Fine. I don't, but, that's what he's got to aim for, and it's not much of an ambition, sure, but 15th to 11th is £10 million, and that's someone's wages for next year, so could be important. So everyone down there will be thinking about that, as Newcastle have done over the years, and we've done a few times. So I think the only thing we need to be achieved here is last year they were walloped by Newcastle, but of course they had bigger fish to fry. They had the Europa League coming up, and it was just sort of a bad time to play Newcastle. I think what's going to be interesting over this game and the next few games is he's clearly improved the defense. Clearly. Can he add some creativity to this team? Are there risks to be taken? And I think he tried it against Brentford. It didn't quite work. He went back to the old 5 at the back, 3 holding midfielders against Arsenal and Leicester and got 2 results. I think if West Ham do win this game on Monday, which they might, it won't be pretty. They'll nick a Soucek corner and they'll hold on for dear life. That's kind of what it looks like at the moment.
So for part 2, we're going to look at a tactical breakdown in terms of the game that we can expect between the two sides on Monday night, Tom. And I suppose when you always do these tactical breakdowns, the first thing that you look at is, these kind of perceived weaknesses in both sides. So what weaknesses do you think Newcastle had that West Ham will try to exploit? And obviously on the flip of that, what weaknesses do West Ham have that Newcastle might be best off trying to exploit?
Well, let me start with West Ham. I think that the weaknesses they have are a total lack of progression from midfield. And I think that is because the people that should be doing it, people like Lucas Paqueta, people like Carlos Soler, Paqueta might be missing. Soler's not been good enough. There's no one that really makes a progressive pass, a through ball for West Ham, which is a shame because Jarrod Bowen, Mo Kudus going on to through balls, might be something that could work. But at the moment, we've seen no evidence that might happen. So I think the lack of being able to get the ball upfield is going to be an issue. And you saw that a bit against Leicester. It was like the most passes they've had in a game all season. I think Aaron Cresswell alone did 100. There's been games where they've done less than 200 as a team. So that is going to be more of a Potter thing. I think that's evident. That always was kind of the case with him. Sometimes Brighton fans got a bit bored of Potter's team because they just had the ball and were doing nothing with it. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can work out a way to progress the ball. At the moment, there's not a great deal of evidence of that. There's a lot of players there that are built in the kind of David Moyes fast counter mode. That's where they excel, and that isn't what this manager's going to want. So that is an issue. And even though the last couple of games have been better, I think defensively there are still massive holes in terms of West Ham. Kilman cannot defend. He just is not a defender. I think he's a good footballer, and I think next year, if he's playing on the left side of a 3, could be a really good progressive sort of Adam Webster at Brighton sort of type, or what Fabian Schär does at Newcastle, that sort of player. I think Schär's a better defender, but that's the comparison I make in terms of being a footballer. And if Mavropanos plays, I mean, he's just appalling. Forgive me, but he's just one of the worst defenders you've ever seen. His judgment is appalling. He's rash. He's erratic. He gives terrible free kicks away. It's just appalling. So if Mavropanos is there, and if Isak is fit, pull Isak onto Mavropanos. That's at least 1 goal. Plus, Aaron Cresswell, there's a lack of pace there. He's 35 and has never really been a player who's a centre-half. Ollie Scholes on the left has been brilliant, but he is a teenager playing in that position. I think Scholes will continue in place of Emerson, whose legs might have gone a bit. He's played a lot of football, Emerson. So I think defensively there's issues, and I think Newcastle's midfield. It depends on the Newcastle midfield. If it is a midfield of just trying to work out who's injured and who's fit, and obviously that's the big issue with Newcastle right now. But if they can get the midfield together of Tonali, Joe Linton and Bruno, if that's the midfield here, I think as last year, they will probably overpower West Ham because there's not a great deal of power in that West Ham midfield. But if I'm not to disrespect Lewis Miley or Longstaff or the other guys that play in there, or Joe Willock if he goes in there, but I think the drop-off in quality, the drop-off in power in those players, there is a chance for the West Ham midfield battle if they get their fullbacks forward and make it a 5. There's a chance they could win that battle. So that's where I think maybe West Ham, if they flood the midfield, they overrun a midfield 3 that might not be the first choice, there's every possibility they can control this game. How they score a goal is the big problem. In terms of Newcastle, I think if I was West Ham, I'd be looking at how shaky that defence has been when Sven Botman's not been there this season. And if obviously he's out again for this one. If it ends up being Dan Burn and Fabian Schär, I would push Thomas Soucek further forward to do a physical battle with Dan Burn. And I would have Kudus and Bowen buzzing around Schär and maybe pulling onto the Trippier side rather than what I imagine would be the Livramento side. I think Hall's injured as well. So that's what I would do. And I think if they can win that knockdown and suddenly you've got these two guys buzzing around Fabian Schär and Livramento, or on the other side, Trippier, I'd think, yeah, okay, we can get something here. We can get up the field being a little bit more physical with them. So that is where I think Newcastle could have some issues. And then offensively too, Anthony Gordon's such a huge loss, right? Such a huge loss. I'm going to be doing the commentary of the Cup final next week. And, I really would love to see Newcastle win it. That won't be reflected in the commentary, but I love new winners. And, do we really want Liverpool winning another trophy? I'll never forget in 2006 when we lost the FA Cup final to Liverpool and I spent a couple of days in Cardiff. The first day is all very but the second couple of days you're in town. I saw a bit of Cardiff and there was Liverpool fans about. And I was just chatting to one who was a lovely guy. And I was like, what'd you make of? Do you enjoy it? Winning it? Was it good? Good feeling? I don't know how I got into that part of the conversation. And he just said, yeah, it wasn't as good as last year, though, when they won the Champions League. And I just thought, oh, it's so annoying. Because, if we'd have won the FA Cup then, I never thought we'd win a trophy again. We've still not been to the FA Cup final since. It's been 20 years. So, I don't want the winner to be it's an afterthought. I want the winner, as it would be for Newcastle, to be a never before seen thing. So I'd love them to win it, but Gordon not being there, the doubts about Isak. I think if the second choice offense is there, there's every chance West Ham could shut that down, even though Callum Wilson always scores against us. You saw he's so rusty right now. Even Callum Wilson surely will struggle in his current fitness against West Ham and in his age as well. So there's your issue with Newcastle. The first team won't be there, and your issues with West Ham are there's no progression on the ball. So it screams 0-0, frankly.
Spoiler alert, we are recording this at the same time as well that Eddie Howe is doing his press conference Friday morning. So we're unsure in terms of, kind of the latest, we're doing this a little bit blind in terms of the latest on that Newcastle team and the interest that they've got. But I suppose that is the interesting point that you were raising there, in that next week they'll be preparing for the Carabao Cup final against Liverpool. And in terms of the team that they've got at the minute, there are question marks over certain players. And you would ordinarily not risk them, would you, this week? Yes, they've still got a lot to play for in the Premier League and want to be getting back into the Champions League next season. But at the same time, as you said there, this opportunity, especially for Newcastle fans as well, not as fortunate as West Ham fans in terms of, obviously the Europa Conference League a couple of years back. Newcastle fans have to go way, way back for that last trophy. And does that make it then harder for West Ham to know what to anticipate in a way? Because in your head, you're telling no, they'll play their strongest team because they've got so much to play for. But there is still so much to play for next weekend for Newcastle with all these injury doubts. I mean, for me, I'd be the conservative one and I wouldn't play any of them. I'll try and kind of wrap them in cotton wool for that final instead.
Well, I will say this firstly, that, there is the whole debate. It always goes on. I work at TalkSport. I'm always having the conversation of, is it better to be in the top 4 or win something? It's win something. It's win something, 1000%. And we qualified for Europe, thankfully, which got us onto that 3-year run, which got us to the Conference League final and the Europa League semi-final. Being in Prague for that final, I was chatting to Alphonse Areola about it a couple of days ago. And it's just, it's incomparable to anything. It just really, really, as pathetic as it sounds, it was better than anything I've ever experienced in my entire life. When Areola caught that ball at the end and I knew we were going to win, never been happier. Just never been happier. And I want that for Newcastle. And I think Newcastle fans want that. And I want, you guys watching this to experience it. And I think that, you saw a couple of years ago, I was at the final where they lost to Man U and they're bad on the day. Didn't turn up on the day. Man U just sort of managed their way through to victory. And you saw the form tail off before the final. And I think maybe watching it from the outside, it seems like the players, the club feel the pressure of needing to win that trophy. And you've got to deliver for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Everyone knows that. So, like, I think there is a pressure and there has been a drop off of form. And if it were me, I would just bin off this game entirely. 7th is still up for grabs. 8th could get you Europe. Might not be Champions League, but great to be in the Europa. If you're in the conference, do everything you possibly can to win that competition. Any competition you can go in that Man City and Liverpool aren't in, focus on that, because if they're not in it, you might win it, right? I'd much rather be in the conference or the Europa League than the Champions League, because there's no chance of winning it. Look at like Brest in the Champions League this year. Like, what's the point? What was the point of that? And there's no drop down anymore to go into a competition you can win, do the Sevilla thing. So if it were me, I'd drop everyone. Not just because you're taking on West Ham. It don't matter really to us whether we win or lose. The season's over. Drop everyone, rest everyone, get everyone fully fit and ready for next week. That should be the focus. I'm not sure Eddie's going to do that. You know, you said he's speaking right now. But if there's even a 5% risk on Alexander Isak, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't take it. They could still win the game with Wilson. Gives West Ham more of a chance. But Alexander Isak is a world-class forward. World-class forward. And if he's got a headache, I wouldn't play him in the game on Monday to make sure he's ready for Sunday next week. Because if he's not there, you won't win it.
Tom, we're going to finish up in time on a fashion as well for prediction for how you think the game's going to go on Monday night. I'll be kind. I'll go first, and I'm going to nick your one from earlier on in the show where you said that it's got 0-0 written all over it. Sit on the fence and have a few splinters in my backside instead. But how do you see the game finishing up on Monday?
Yeah, look, I think it'll be a draw. I think draw is the most likely outcome. I think West Ham, as I mentioned, defensively look more solid and more organised, more ready for a game like this. I think if that moron Lopetegui was still there, I'd suggest maybe 4 or 5-0. But I think they will play for a draw. They won't be progressive. And Thomas Soucek from a corner will press back with his delivery. Every chance, as last time, they can score a set piece against Newcastle, who have struggled at corners the last few weeks. I've noted it's not been as good as they were in the first half of the season before the Soucek one, which I think was the first corner they actually conceded all season. But they looked a little bit wobbly, I thought, last couple of games I watched. And of course, Botman not being there is going to be significant to that. So I think West Ham can nick a goal in some way, but I can't see them keeping a clean sheet if Isak plays. If Isak's not there, might potentially change my prediction to nick a West Ham low-scoring win, but I think really low-scoring, under 3 goals, 1-1, 0-0, at a push, 2-1 either way. I don't think it'll be the thriller of last season. And I think we'd all be happy with a nice draw, wouldn't we? A draw, no injuries, wipe your mouth, move on.
Newcastle fans, let us know your own predictions in the comments as well. Of course, be sure to get involved in the conversation. Tom, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. Of course, you can keep up to date with all the latest going into the match and after the match as well across the Newcastle Chronicle website. Make sure to check back to the podcast next week as well, when I promise you will be hearing more local accents and more familiar voices rather than mine. And of course, that will deal with all the fallout from the match and of course, start the build up towards that Carabao Cup final. But all that's left for me to say is goodbye.